turn the heat maybe? It's like,
Yeah.
oh, just heat. It's boiling here, no?
Yeah.
No?
You're being sarcastic. Yeah.
Yes.
I was wondering for a second.
No. I don't know, it's like sometimes you find people like they're from southern United States, and this is not, and other people from northern United States. Alright. I'm sorry, you can still put it there, sorry. It's not gonna work. The phlegm only gets to about that far.
Scoop down.
Alright. We're gonna
You want to be in the
try to get into this. This is like co-ed Israelite here. Okay, what we're going to try to do tonight is go through a lot of different Gemaras, or not that many different Gemaras, but a few different Gemaras, and try to tie together a lot of stories and concepts that you have probably heard of and that you might be familiar with in terms of Hanukkah, and you've probably heard them before in the past, and try to solidify them and analyze them by bringing together a lot of ideas as to what's relating to both Hanukkah and the period of time that we're in, and sort of put these things together. And the first thing we're going to start with is the idea of Hanukkah. People always talk about the idea of light. As a matter of fact, that's the name of the class that we talked about, is light at the end of the tunnel. The famous expression, person's looking for the light at the end of the tunnel. And as one New Yorker once quipped, says the problem with the light of the tunnel is when it's the oncoming train. Then you like serious problems with it. But light symbolically has always represented, in most cultures in the world, the idea of hope. That there's some sort of hope, there's a future. Tunnel is the idea of darkness. There's light out there, there's something to be obtained, not worth quitting, something that a person's going to be able to gain. In Judaism, in its symbolism, light has always been associated with wisdom. This even goes back to the classical Ravina Bugs Bunny. Whenever you saw Bugs in the middle of the cartoon and you had an idea, the little bing, the light bulb goes on. In Judaism, where Bugs probably stems from, or roots from, Bugs brings the idea that light is wisdom. Judaism, light is also wisdom. Every time you see an equation referring to light, it's often referred to as wisdom. A classic example is even in this week's Parsha. When Yaakov is struggling with the angel of Esav, if you look carefully at the pasuk, it says, "Vayizrach lo hashemesh." It shines to him the sun. It should really say, "Vayizrach hashemesh lo," that the sun shines to him. But rather that what's shining to him is the shemesh, is the sun, is light. That when Yaakov reaches the level of Yisrael, he comes from the lower level of Jacob to the higher level of Rosh Li, which is what the letters Israel spell out. We'll talk about that later tonight. That idea, he reaches to that level, then with wisdom he's able to resolve his problems. In Judaism we always say the key to everything is in wisdom. This is why the number one commandment of all the commandments in the Bible, even beyond like putting on tefillin or thou shalt not snork down pig, or all the different concepts of what we associate Judaism with, the number one commandment, believe it or not, is to learn. Because as a person understands, as a person comes to the level of wisdom, a person is able to grow and to be able to handle themselves. As a matter of fact, there's a classical joke once told to me by the Rosh Hashiva of Or Sameach. He said that if you look at the descent of mankind, if you watch how the fall of mankind, the first one to come along was Moses. Moses says to the whole world, the answer to all your problems are in your mind. All you have to do is just think, and you'll be able to figure out what you need to do. Comes along Lahavdil after that, JC, and he says, no, it's not in your mind at all. It's in your heart. Just believe, just blind faith, just total feelings. And after JC comes along, Karl Marx says, no, it's in the stomach. It's everybody's got to be fed. It's the working man. And then after that is Sigmund Freud, and that's basically where the world is today. Well, somebody said they came along Pele, and the whole world's into the World Cup, But basically, this is the fall of man from the mind all the way down to the feet, or to the soul, if you will. But the concept is really that inside wisdom is the ability to understand everything. On a deeper level, the Zohar reveals to us that because when God created the world, the element, the modus operandus behind which all works is wisdom. And therefore the essence, once you can take away the veil of nature, which we're going to talk a lot about Mitzvah Shem tonight, once you can remove that veil, behind it is wisdom. You see, the definition of life in Judaism is not necessarily the beating heart. In Judaism, there are 4 categories of life. There is your angelic level, if you will. There is your human level. There is your animal or plant level. And then there's even your rock, your stone, your in matter, the lack of life. What we would call lack of life in Judaism is really everything has life to it. Because the essence of what gives something life is the direct connection between it and the will of God. That if there is God, I know that's a big heavy one, but let's play the make-believe game. If there is God, and it's the Jewish definition of God, we're not talking King Kong, we're not talking big, we're not talking about something you wouldn't want to mess in an alley with. That's not God, that's like Sir, but not God. When we're talking about God, we're talking about Omni, etc. It's the everything of everything. And when God is there, then there's nothing outside of God. It's not God plus a second element. And therefore, when we're talking about life, it means that there has to be, if there's God, there has to be a direct link between any item and the will of God. And thus that's what gives it life, is because God is perpetually, without even a blink, is perpetually allowing the thing to exist. The minute God were to sneeze or be distracted, lost another universe. All right, I'll start again. But as long as there's that perpetual connection, that's what gives it life. Therefore, the rock is as alive as I am. Because there is a focus on the rock, there's a focus on myself. All has life in it. But behind the life, behind the sustenance, is the concept of wisdom. Now, one of the famous pivotal points, therefore, of Hanukkah is the idea of the menorah, or the Chanukkiah, the concept of that which generates light into the world. The original Chanukkiah, or what we call more traditionally is the menorah, was one of the vessels that was found inside the temple. And the way that it basically appeared was stemming from a central source. It came up and divided into 7 branches. 3 to the left, 3 to the right, and 1 in the center. These 7 branches are in juxtaposition to the 7 positions of time and space. And some of the students who have worked with me before are familiar with it, so I'm just going to go very briefly. There are 7 positions of space. There are 7 positions of time, as follows. On a simplistic level, if I wish to move into space, I have north, south, east, west, up, and down. Or if you think of a cube, you have your 6 sides. Those are my 6 movements into the external world. The 7th position of space is non-movement. It's rest. It's the middle of the box. This is also symbolized in the Star of David. You have your 6 external points of movement. These are the 6 days of the work week, where one goes out into the world. And then the 7th position of the Star of David is the center of the star, which is the Shabbat. Connected to the number 7 is the position of rest. To move in space requires time. According to the mystical literature in Judaism, one cannot have space without having time, although one can have time without having space, because to occupy space is a dimension of time. To move and have parameter within space requires a depth in time as well. Therefore, as there are 6 positions in space, there are 6 positions in time. The 6 days of the work week. The 7th position of space, rest, is equal to the 7th day of time, which is Shabbat. The menorah illuminates all facets of creation. The menorah brings light into every aspect. However, when you zoom in on the menorah itself, one of the things that's fascinating to be aware of is that the lip of each one of the bowls, from where the wick stemmed from, the light was pointed at, the 3 outer sides all pointed towards the center. You had 3 to the left pointing to the center, 3 to the right pointing to the center. All 6 come from or to the center. The center being the 7th position. It's not really correct to think of Shabbat, so to speak, as like going up in that sense. It's really more that from Shabbat to Shabbat, the week comes into a lull and then grows and then carries from that high. But Shabbat is the center. That's the idea that the 7th menorah, the 7th candle within the menorah is really the center one. However, the center one, it faced in the direction of the north. And the reason it's in the north is because the word in Hebrew for north, tzfon, means hidden. That the north is always that which symbolizes that which is hidden. And hidden means it's obscure, it's abstracted from your intelligence. You don't know what to do. I'm confused, I'm not sure, it's uncertain, it's not clear. Therefore, the challenge, the job of the menorah was to bring light, was to bring wisdom into darkness. That's the whole function of what it primarily dealt on, that idea of aiming the light into the north, bringing clarity into that which is confused. The Malbim highlights this in a very interesting way. The Malbim in Parshas Truma goes through every one of the different vessels which were used in the temple and equates it to the human being, puts it into the body of the person. And it mentions the fact that the mind, the human brain, is the menorah. Again, the equation of light and the equation of wisdom. And that idea is that within ourselves, all of the different facets, all of the aspects of our life is constantly trying to bring meaning, clarity, and depth of understanding into that which is most important, meaning that which we look out in. The idea of going to tzfon is the idea of the light which faces in front of us. We mentioned this once the other day in the Israelite class. We were talking about the idea of the word Gomorrah. This is Sfas Emes brings us down. That the idea of one fights the war of God inside the Gomorrah. How is that? So we have 4 angels that we talk about when a person goes to sleep at night. And the 4 angels surround the person are Gavriel, Mechoel, Uriel, and Rifoel. And if you analyze their names carefully and their positions, you will see that the angel Uriel is the one that is in front of us. The idea of Uriel being in front of us is the Or Kel. The light of God goes in front of us. It illuminates our ways. Refoel, from refuah, to heal, is the angel which is behind us, because if something goes wrong, we need the healing. That which slipped by us, that which we weren't able to handle, that which we fumbled, is still able to be repaired. The 4 letters of the 4 names of these angels which surround us spell the word Gomorrah. Now when a person applies themselves into the hidden light, the light of the Torah Sheba'al Peh, which is symbolized by Hanukkah, when a person moves into that deeper light, one is able to fight away, what is the idea of war? It's confusion, uncertainty, struggle. This is coming back to the idea of Yaakov struggling with the angel of Esav. How does Yaakov defeat the angel of Esav? With wisdom. How does a Jew fight the war of his own particular life? With wisdom. And therefore, as a person puts that light into their mind, it illuminates into the darkness being that which is in front of me. The uncertainty of what should I do with the remainder of my life. That focus becomes the menorah on the personal level. Now the individual who represented the menorah into its peak was Aaron HaKohen, the high priest who served in the temple, his name being, as we know him, the brother of Moses and Miriam, as Aaron. And what happened was a very interesting thing. Aaron symbolizes service, doing, action, movement. Every essence, every part of his essence, everything in his being had purpose, direction. If you asked Aaron, why was he sprinkling the blood in this fashion? Why was he bringing wood in this way? Even the way he would walk, every aspect, every nuance of his life was the epitome of wisdom. He was action coupled with wisdom. Aaron comes along at a time in the Torah when they are establishing the Mishkan. We call in English, it's referred to as the tabernacle. This was the first housing unit. You can think of it like a landing pod for the divine presence. You know, it's like, everybody remembers Spielberg's Close Encounter. This is like ultimate encounter. God coming down into the world, and you've got like this divine presence, and all of a sudden, where are you going to put it, right? If you have a problem like that, yo, man, what am I going to do with this divine presence? Yo, put it over here, Jackson. So divine presence, except this case was Mo. Yo, Mo, put it down in this little house over here. Yo, the house that Mo built. So here comes this tabernacle, here comes this unit, which is going to be the embodiment of divine presence. What does that really mean? It means your body. Your body is the vessel that holds the most valuable item you possess, your life. And the way that you develop that relationship of spiritual and physical world, not one, God forbid, at the exclusion of the other, but the synthesis and the balance of being spiritual while being physically normal, that harmony is the challenge of maintaining the infinite inside the finite. If a person thinks about this carefully, ask yourself the following question. Where is the infinite? You know, I mean, where is it? Like a lot of times, you know, people will tell you, like back in the olden days and so in the 60s and stuff, yeah, man, I experienced the infinite. ate this mushroom, and the next thing I knew, I was out there in deep outer space, took out these binoculars, and there at the end of the Milky Way was this little golden glitter, like a McDonald's arch over the top, and there, it's the infinite. I've seen the infinite. That's ridiculous. If there is something called infinite, think about this, there can only be one of them. We're talking about the infinity of infinities. If there is something called infinite, it's as equally infinite on the tip of your nose as it is anywhere else. Because if it's deficient, if it's not as intensely infinite right here, okay, the problem might be we don't have the ability to perceive that. But if it's not as intensely infinite right here, then it's not infinite. It's big, but it's not infinite. Where then, if you have the infinite, does the finite fit in? Because if the finite is as opposed to the infinite, then the infinite is no longer infinite. It's big. It's 99 plus 1, but that's 2. We believe in 1. The answer in Judaism is that the finite is inside the infinite. And that's why, for example, Judaism is philosophically, diametrically the opposite of pantheism. Whereas in pantheism, people will tell you that God is in you, and God is in me, and God is in the tree. The Jews will tell you it's just the opposite. The Jew will tell you that actually you, I, and the tree, we are in God. This is why one of the names of God is called Hamakom, which means the place. That in fact the finite is inside God. As one comes to have encounter with God, it's not going there, it's just realizing what's here. It's being able to take away the darkness, being able to remove the veil, to be able to strip away the illusion. Therefore, the encounter with God, or the infinite, where is the intersection? Where is the threshold? Where does the finite actually synapse with the infinite? Where do they connect? With your very life. As the Vilna Gaon explains, the human being is the intersection zone between the spiritual and the physical world. The body comes out of the finite, which is the physical. It comes up out of the earth. And the soul comes out of time. One is space, which is physical. The other is time, which is infinite. The soul comes out of the zone of time and returns to that which is time. And the body comes out of that which is space. It returns to space. The miracle of the human being is the ability to touch the infinite. There is no other opportunity to shape or form or relate to the infinite than those moments that you are alive. Right now, bam, you're on the court, it's happening. No timeouts, nothing. You're on the court. What do I do with this ball? Shoot it, right? But you are alive. Whatever you do, some people pop it into their career, other people go for jumpers into India. But whatever it is, few of us finally get around to slam dunking Judaism. But whatever it is, man, it's your life, you're alive with it, you're living with it. Those moments are whatever you will make are the shape of your soul. And that's the symbolism of the Mishkan. The Mishkan is the national body. It's the nation of the Jews together which formulates one body. God creates the human being, talked about this just yesterday. God creates the human being and He disintegrates, He dissolves Adam into this world. And the reason He dissolves Adam into the world is the same way that God dissolves the seed in the ground, because when the seed is destroyed, it comes back into the world as a more refined element, a tree, a plant, a flower. God dissolves the human being as Adam so that the dissolved Adam would now come into a nation called the Jewish people. So that the entire nation as a peoplehood can come to the level of Adam. How they come to the level of Adam is by growth, is by doing. By taking concepts which are infinite and translating them down into momentary, finite experiences. This is the epitome of what Aaron represents. Aaron represents taking the divine presence, taking the infinite, and translating it down into mundane daily experience. And this is why in Judaism you have the most important interface or relationship between the concept of Torah, the depth of spiritual understanding, the concept of wisdom, and yet the necessity for mitzvah, the reality of the body. The body becomes called Ner. It's the candle. It's the housing unit through which the light, the flame, gives birth. And that's why it's called Torah Or, because the light is infinite, but it requires the vessel for the light to be present. That vessel becomes known as Ner. At the time when this... Sure.
I was wondering if you could...
I don't know if anybody else has a problem, but just talking a little slower so I can understand everything you're saying, maybe?
Oh,
Just-
no
I don't know,
problem.
No, I mean,
No, that's all right. I thought I was talking
so much
slow.
interesting things you're saying.
I mean, I'm from Midtown Manhattan, so man, when we really talk fast, and we really okay, sure. No, chas v'shalom, don't be sorry. Just be, what's your name?
Ariel.
Ariel? Okay, that's good enough. Don't be sorry. Okay, so Aaron is coming along at a time. Just like tell me, 33, 16, right? Whatever you want. So, Aaron comes along at a time, he watches a phenomenal event happening. There are the princes of the Jewish people. They're called the Nisim. And this tabernacle needs to be put together. It means to be dedicated. And the first tabernacle which was ever dedicated was the altar where Abraham brings up Isaac. And at a classical moment, I mean, we always have this little image of, the famous sacrificing of Isaac. Abraham's this very religious kind of dude with a beard out here sort of thing. And he's like going up, divinely inspired to sacrifice his son. And the little kid's got like the little dog on the wheels pulling it, and he's got the lollipop and the popcorn. And, where are we going, Dad? Where are we going? Just come along, little kid. And then you find out that in fact this man was into deep 30s. And being into deep 30s, I can relate to the experience, And he's like really very much aware of what's going on. He's even putting little magic marker dots on his neck. He's completely aware as to. You can't always think of real terms. Is that slow enough? He was completely aware. Just kidding. You from Tennessee? No.
California.
He's completely aware of everything that's going on and what's always flying. He's totally in tune with it. And he turns around to his father at a classical moment, and he says to his father, look, Dad, we've got the wood, we've got the fire, where is the sacrifice? What was he really asking? He was saying wood is natural resources. Fire is potential. It's the energy, it's the electricity. To build any movement, to build any institution, to build anything requires both the natural resources and somebody behind you is going to bankroll you. It requires the finances to get it off the ground. But both of those things become stagnant. They become meaningless if there's not an individual who's going to put himself down on the line. If there's not somebody who's going to say, I'll be the sacrifice. I'm going to put the time and the effort to make this thing happen. You can have all the money in the world, you can have all the natural resources in the world, but without the dedication, without the commitment to say, this is where I make my stand, without that happening, it never happens. So the first altar, the first place where this became dedicated was by Isaac saying to his father Abraham, I appreciate, I understand everything that you've done, I'm going to carry the ball from here. I take it into the next generation. The creation of the tabernacle was the same experience on a national level. The princes, which represented the different tribes, brought sacrifices to create the Chanukkas Habayis. The Chanukka, even you can catch the word together. The Chanukka from the word Noach, to rest. The dedication, the establishment of the building, they brought the sacrifices. And they were saying that the nation is ready to dedicate itself to this goal. And that is very important. And that's actually what, ironically, each one of the princes, not in cahoots with the other, wound up bringing the exact same offering, which symbolizes that although the tribes were very different from one another, when it came to their collective spiritual essence, they were all coming from the same point, therefore it all lined up. However, there was a bizarre situation happening. Aaron is watching this go on, and he feels left out. Here's a man who's going to be the central command of the entire temple operation, of the tabernacle operation, and he's not involved in it. He's not a part of it. He's not at the ceremony. So God comes along and says to him, don't worry, I have something for you which is going to last beyond theirs. Theirs is a temporary experience. Theirs is the writing out of the UJA or UIA check. Theirs is, yeah, we believe in this cause. Here, we're making sacrifice. We're ripping the money out of our pocket. We're dedicating. But Aaron was the man who was going to be living it. Much higher experience. It's one thing to be able to believe it. It's one thing to be able to intellectually fathom it. But it's another thing to translate it into you. To make it what you live. To make it what you are. And that's what Aaron represents. The living example of it. So God comes along, and what is his sacrifice? His sacrifice is a very bizarre one. His sacrifice becomes the menorah. God says to him, I'm going to allow you to establish the menorah. And the menorah, we are told in the Gemara and Shabbos, the menorah becomes something which represents, it says, the Gemara says here, it's an edus, it's a testimony of everybody who comes into this world that the divine presence dwells in Israel. You know, I mean, just kind of like think about that for a minute. The menorah, and try to figure it out. I mean, it's strange on the surface. The menorah represents the symbol, the little, eat it hojos on the highway. The little something that everybody who comes into the world knows that the divine presence lives or dwells in Israel. How does the menorah accomplish that? To be able to understand it, you have to take a look at the way the Maharsha approaches the Gemara. The Maharsha points out something which we know and ties it together in a very interesting thing. The room that the menorah was placed in had windows that were shaped in the reverse nature to the way we would normally make windows. The normal function of a window in a house is to bring light into the room. The shape of the windows that housed the menorah were the opposite. Their job was to put the menorah's light out into the world. It was not that it needed light from the outside world, it's that the outside world needed the light of the menorah. There was something in the process of the menorah that brought its wisdom from inside to outside, from hidden to revealed, from the north, which is hidden, to the light, which is wisdom. Something which at one point is concealed becomes, upon deeper understanding, revealed. And by the menorah's accomplishing that, it brings into the essence of life purpose. That's what the Shekhinah represents. The divine presence, unfortunately we've watched too many Monty Python movies, and we always have this image, when you hear the line, the will of the Lord, it's some dude pulls out a sword and hacks off another guy's head. May it be the will of the Lord, right? And the guy's head comes off. In Judaism, when we say the will of the Lord, you are in it right now. If the name God is Hamakom, which means place, then where is God? You're right here, man. You're swimming inside of it. You're like pulling on God's beard, I mean, it's like right here, boing. You are inside the infinite. This is it. There's nowhere to go. It's just to wake up. It's just to become aware. It's to illuminate the reality, to see what's really in front of us. To become aware of that is intelligence. The menorah is the light that goes into the darkness and removes the veil. The divine presence, if you wanted to say it in like a thesaurus, you want to create like a Jewish thesaurus, you look up divine presence, the first word next to it should be the word truth. Because truth equals reality. This is why the Gemara says a very interesting thing. It says the divine presence can never be revealed to a liar. Somebody who lies, God forbid, can never have a contact with God. There will always be a veil. And not that God put the veil there, but that the person by lying puts the veil there. Because to lie is to distort, to exaggerate, or to manipulate, or to change reality. This is the reality of what happened. This is the truth of the matter. A person doesn't want to see that. A person wants to misread or that's not reality. And since divine revelation means reality in Judaism, so one who is a liar is one who separates himself from that ability to experience truth, to really see what it's all about. To really see what it's all about. Not even as it appears, but to be able to go beneath the surface and to see what it's really all about. The menorah, therefore, thrives on something called oil. And oil, the Gemara Menachos explains at length, that when they used to make the oil for the menorah, they would take the olive, and the very first little pink, that first top drop that came out of it, that oil would be set aside for the oil that would be used inside the menorah. That's the oil that they used to burn. And what does the idea of the oil really represent? The idea of the oil is the same idea of the disintegration of Adam. It's the disintegration of the seed. It's the crushing. It's the pain. It's the hell that we go through in our lives. The Gemara says in such a poetic way, it says that a person would spend 1,000 zuz, which translates into modern day terminology as megabucks. A person would spend 1,000, what was it, meganar? With a whole new level? Meganar. What was it?
Meganair.
Meganair, right? We came up with a new phrase the other day, like beyond a millionaire is a meganair. Right? That's like megabucks of megabucks, as a person who's a meganaire. Anyhow, it'll work. Take time. Wait till Time Magazine picks it up. They were in like Flint. So a person would spend 1,000 zoos not to have pain. I mean, imagine this. God forbid a person knew, God comes over and says, look, next month I think I've arranged a little car accident for you. You're going to basically go through the windshield and, I just thought I'd let you know. Hey, God, come on, man, just name the price, here's the check. I mean, a person would pay money to avoid that. If you knew, God forbid, such an event, you wouldn't pay to avoid it? And yet the Gemara says that anything that you would do to avoid such a situation, if a person goes through hardships in their life, and they come out balanced, they come out stronger, they wouldn't sell the experience for anything in the world. Because it's actually that which made you come to life. It was that slap in the face. It was that rude awakening to really deal with life as it is that becomes your most precious, valuable element. And unfortunately, even in terms of our Judaism, so often, which is a wonderful thing, we come into environments which are so supportive of our Jewish behavior. And it's easy to wear yarmulke or have our freak flags fly. We call them tzitzis today. Used to be long hair, whatever it is. We feel comfortable in this kind of environment because it's supportive. But you know what really is the acid test? You know when a person really sometimes knows where they're at in terms of their Jewish identity? It's when you go back to the university. It's when you go back to your community. It's when you go back to where it's not so comfortable. Then the push, then the olive gets crushed. And that's at the point where if your growth was balanced, because wisdom must be balanced. As Rabbi Nachman of Breslov says, although it's oil which gives light to the candle, excessive oil puts out the very light itself. And this is why, though there was light from the menorah, the key part of the candelabra was the middle, because the wisdom has to be balanced. When a person is balanced, when a person grows, then they grow at their own natural pace. They're not being pulled, they're not being pushed. When a person grows, then as they go into difficult environments, they will survive, they will stand up. But the crushing of the olive is what makes them come to life. And as a person is able to understand that, then a person prepares themselves, every step and every stage of their development becomes like that. So God says back to Aaron, these individuals who represent the Nisim, who are, the word Nisim, by the way, in Hebrew also is from the word cloud. There are levels of heavens. There is a lower level of heaven which represents the cloud. The cloud is something which blocks the vision to the eternal. The cloud, although it's an uplifting experience, although it's something that allows us to see that there's something above us, it's still not as high as the light of the sun. The concept of the princes was that they represent life in this world, the natural order of things. And therefore the princes were somebody who brought the sacrifice. They tried to raise themselves like the cloud to the higher level than just being a mundane human being. However, Aaron was not the human being living in the world of the natural. He was the human being who went all the way into the essence. He lived in the supernatural or the supernature. And therefore his relationship was the level of the sun, if you will. His was the level of the menorah, the concept of light which came higher. This is also symbolized that these were the two elements which led the Jewish people. There was the cloud and there was the pillar of fire. There were the cloud, which was the princes who led them in the sense of where they should go in terms of leading them in the daily life, which is always represented by the day. But then into the darkness was the light. Into that which goes into the hidden, the deeper aspects of the supernatural. How does somebody push away the veil and reach into the eternal? How does one bottle the infinite and use it in this life? That already is the higher level of the menorah. To go further, we come into another miracle that occurred within the traditional menorah. And that was that the first candle which was lit was the last one that needed to be relit. Although they all had the same amount of oil in each one of them, the very first one to be lit was the last one to go out. When a person applies themselves, that which a person does in the beginning, like we say in Luchot Dodi, Sof Maaseh Machshav Tchila, the initial inspiration which is given to a person when they begin a movement in their life is the most precious of all. The beginning, the rashis, the start of something is the most valuable energy that a person has. The idea of the beginning of wisdom that comes into the world, the idea of the first part of the menorah which is lit, that is something which will carry a person into all aspects of their life. And this is why, as somebody begins even their growth in Judaism, sometimes you will see there's an interesting lull that happens in the Jewish experience. A person can first come into Judaism and be very turned on, be very inspired, be very uplifted. And then all of a sudden, a couple of months go by, and maybe 6 months go by, a year goes by, and they're not really to the point where they're independent. They're still earthbound. They haven't been able to, like, I don't know, man, I keep twisting my tefillin, but I don't fly yet. You know, I'm flapping my tzitzis, but I saw that other rabbi, wow. But like, I don't know, man, to me it's just still Hebrew. It's not like out there land. And therefore they come into a lull. The way that a person carries themselves from one end to the other is by going to beginnings. How does a person begin? A person begins before they even came into this world. And the way that a person comes into this world, this ties back to the purpose of the menorah. The purpose of the menorah is it talks about all who come into the world. Why doesn't it say all that live in the world? Why is there the emphasis on the arrival to planet Earth? Well, there's another light, which is a very symbolic light in our life. The Gemara says in a sort of cryptic way that when a baby is inside of its mother, there's a candle that burns on the forehead of the baby and illuminates from one end of the universe to the other. And then, of course, we know that the angel, of course, metaphorically, so to speak, learns the entire Torah with the child, and just as the baby is about to be completed, the last part of the human anatomy is the little groove between the nose and the upper lip, and the angel goes, psst, and as soon as he does that, bam, it's all forgotten. That's usually, you know, imagine like if you had a little baby who was born with a human mouth, right? The whole thing here is like totally baby, you know, but the mouth, with the beard even, the mouth came out like that. So what you would hear little babies when they were first being born saying is, what the heck? Huh? What? Wait a minute. The whole Torah, where's that angel? That's what they'd really be saying. But because the mouth is like that, coming out, but if you ever wonder what that little really means is, what, how, earth? No, I've been bodied. Right? I was pure light. I was divine. Moving through the 10 dimensions of Yud, and all of a sudden, you know, like instead of being slimed like in Ghostbusters, I've been bodied. You know, like when they bust you, they put handcuffs on you. When they really bust you, they send you down to like Sing Sing called Earth. Punk! They throw a physical form onto you, and at first it's like, I barely know how to, you know, right? And then like a little kid, you know, you got like your pants like to come up like that or something, you know, and you look like a little Frankenstein, about 12 years old, totally outgrowing your clothes, but then eventually you're slick, it's Lamborghini'd out, you know, got it down hip, you know, you buzz down the street, you even buy those little ties if you got that Wall Street look, you know, they come with little fans, you put them under the tie so the tie's always going over your shoulder, and it's constantly looking for it, right? So you're like, you're totally into Earth, you're completely into here, you've lost all connection to the divine. And yet, ironically, we are told we are guests in planet Earth. What is the word guest? The Baal Shem Tov says as follows. The word guest is called an oreach, or ches, the light of 8. The number 8 in Judaism symbolizes the infinite. It's interesting too because even in English, when we use the number 8, if you flip it on its side, it's the infinite symbol. But in Judaism, the number 8 also represents the connection to the infinite. This is the circumcision in the 8th day. The 8th day is a day which is so spiritual, it requires no vessel in space that it needs to be designated to. Shabbat is only the 7th day. It's spirituality within the physical cycle. And therefore it requires a spatial vessel called the 7th day from which it can occupy a place. But the 8th day is completely free of any connection. It's obtainable. It's accessible to man in this world. But it's not of this world. It's the infinite. That's the 8th day. The 8th day can occur on any day of the week because it needs no day within space to occupy position. So the human being, the essence of the male-female existence on the world, is a hemshich, is a drawing of the light, the or of the 8th. The oreach is the light of the 8th down into this world. That concept of your very essence, which is that pure light which stems from the infinite, when it comes into this world, it sees the revelation that even in this world, it can still connect to the source of light, which is symbolized by the menorah. As one comes into this world, as one has that light on their forehead, so to speak, one has within themselves the capacity, by hitting the olive, drawing out the olive oil, and turning that into light. The potential within you is there for the infinite. That's the guest in this world, is the oreach. And this is what it means that when, as even Rashi and Chumash points out, that when God says to Aaron that your dedication to the temple will be greater than those of the princess, not only does it mean on a higher level of light as opposed to the cloud, but it means on an internal level. Whereas theirs will only be a momentary experience, theirs may be the particular of the generation you happen to be born into. His will be for every generation. His will go from the menorah into the Chanukkiah. His will go from not only in the world of the 7, it will move into the world of the 8. The 8 candles of the menorah as we light them on Hanukkah today. That will be the ability of Chanuach. The Ches, Chanukah, the Ches is Noach. It rests. The guest in this world has found a place to put that light. That light becomes, the Ches is Noach. It rests, Chanukah, it finds its resting inside this world. It has peace, which is what wisdom represents, because peace is from balance. And that is an illumination. Because peace is from balance, and that is an illumination of how everything is meant to be used and work within the world. To go even deeper than that, it's very interesting to analyze. There were 3, the Sfas Emes mentions, there were 3 key commandments that the Greeks prohibited the Jews from performing during their time in reign. One of them was the idea of Shabbos. Think about it, bless you, think about it for a minute. It's like, it's really weird, Shabbos. And the Greeks appreciate that. The Greeks came along and said, okay, listen, man, 10 kilo. I can understand if you want to give everybody one day where they don't work, Saturday, Sunday, Tuesday. That's a great idea. Everybody goes, heavy-duty party, right? They all rest, and everyone feels better. They come back from Fire Island, and everybody's ready for like a whole nother round of work, right? That's a great idea. But to tell me something is silly, I mean, you gotta understand how spaced out Jews are, man. Jews will tell you, under the right set of circumstances, or if you're the individual, you say the wrong set of circumstances, a person can take a clothespin and walk from inside their house outside to the main street, and the next thing they know is they are 6 feet deep pushing roses that way. The court comes along, the guy is snuffed. Death! Death! Take the little clothespin from inside your house, walk outside to the street, under the right circumstances. 2 little Orthodox Jews saying, don't do that, don't do that. All right, I know I shouldn't do it, but I'm doing it anyhow. Big mistake. And the guy goes out there and he does it, and the court zaps him, and he's put to death. Amazing. And the Greeks said, you guys are sick. You guys, I mean, I like the matzo balls and all, but this is like really heavy stuff. You're gonna waste the dude for this, and this is called work? Now you understand, the guy went out there like a safe on his back, or like, the Arabs with the refrigerator on his back. That's work. But this guy is like sort of just carrying out this pin, and you're gonna waste him for it? It's unbelievable. Because the Jews came along and said, Shabbos is not another day of the week. If you could put on these special 3D glasses, when you could look into the fiber, the fabric of Shabbos, it's not made from the same chemistry as the other 6 days of the week. It's a totally different reality. It's just that since, unfortunately, in the secular world, I like to call it the circular world, because like the rat race, but in the secular world, whenever you look at something, you live on the level that seeing is believing, and since you don't know how to see, you haven't developed bifocal vision, which allows you in the lower half to see the physical world, but the higher half to see the spiritual world. Since you only know how seeing is believing, so therefore since you can't see time, you can't discern its differences. In Judaism, we don't say seeing is believing. In Judaism, we say knowing is believing. When you have wisdom, you can understand. If all that you understand is what you see, it's a very limited frame that you perceive the world around you. And therefore, once the third eye opens up and it's able to see, that eye can even see time. It's not restricted to space. It sees all of time. It sees the whole perspective. It sees the whole picture. It sees how mind-boggling it is that we are sitting here tonight as Jews in Jerusalem talking the story of Hanukkah. We should have been, according to all historical analysis, long gone history. And we're sitting here talking about our family, how we wiped out the Greeks in this very city. Probably right under our feet was where the battle scenes were occurring. Mind-boggling. Beyond nature, super nature. You have to know how to begin to see it. The second commandment, they said, is circumcision. They said, look man, this has got to go. I mean, we're Greeks, and we're open to all the cultures of the world, and we appreciate the diversity, and it's really nice having you be Jewish. It adds, culturally, it's like kind of having Quakers in Pennsylvania. It's like nice having Jews around, There's something about those delis can't be beat. But like, you're getting into Mila, there's something wrong with Mila, man. I mean, let's think about Mila for a minute. Think about what's going on to this poor little kid. He doesn't even have a chance. No lawyer, nothing. I mean, damn. He's just taken out in this whole experience. And as far as they were concerned, especially the naked body was the perfection of creation. To do circumcision was as ludicrous as to like take off the tip of your nose or an earlobe. It's because the human body is the perfection, because man is the ultimate. And to come along and to distort that is just pure destruction. They couldn't handle it. But as much as they couldn't handle Shabbos, and as much as they couldn't handle circumcision, what they couldn't handle the most, it seemed like such a contradiction to Jews who are so smart and educated, and all their thoughts are well-rounded and really balanced and so on. What they couldn't handle the most was the idea of the blessing of the new moon. Because the Jews have a concept as follows. The Jews go out and sanctify every 30 days, approximately, the new moon. The new moon creates the holidays, and in fact, it's a question of life or death. Because if a person miscalculated or misunderstood when the court said that there was going to be a new moon, this gentleman or lady may actually be eating bread when in fact it was Passover, something that's a very heavy penalty. And therefore, the concept of the new moon was so bizarre because the Jews said as follows. I mean, this is your family, just in case you want to know like how deep and far out the lunch we are. I mean, this is your family we're talking about here. The Jews say that if the earthly court says today or tonight is the new moon, and they're wrong, we believe that God will rearrange the universe, move the planets, change the course of time to make us right. And they said, come on. Yeah, you guys are really nutso. What are you talking about? I mean, it's one thing that even we as Greeks who idolize the naked body and the gladiator and the warrior and so on, we understand that ultimately there are gods who live above us. I mean, don't forget, the Greeks were pagan by our own simple definition. And their pagan belief in multiple gods, there are still gods who exist above us. And what can we have no effect over the planets. If anything, the planets are what affect us. Our mazal, our horoscopes, our astrological being is completely created by the planets. We have no effect over them. And the Jews answered as follows. They said by Shabbos, the nature of Shabbos is different, as we explained. They said by Mila, that the miracle of creation is that God has left what to be done for the human being. The mortal, the human being has the opportunity to be a partner in creation. Like father, like son. The human being has the ability to complete creation. God specifically left work to be done so that the human being can participate in this experience. And as far as the idea of the new moon, we know that the new moon is the first commandment that the Jews were given as they came out of Egypt. It's the beginning of light. It's the concept of wisdom. As a matter of fact, the light of the new moon is so brilliant that it's not visible at that particular moment. It's not even like when the Rosh Chodesh begins, the new moon isn't even visible to the eye. It's simply the awareness that there is going to be light. There's the beginning of understanding that there's going to be light. That's the beginning of the light, that even as we're coming out of Egypt, we haven't gotten to Sinai, there's been no Torah, but there's the awareness that wisdom is in the world and I can connect to it. I will find it, although I can't see it yet, I can follow that track and it will lead me to the real source of light. That's the beginning. When a person becomes inspired, the first step to move out of Egypt. The very word Egypt, Mitzrayim, means mitzar, from being constricted. The whole idea of Egypt was the idea of restriction, the inability to be open, the inability to be relaxed, the inability to be at peace with yourself, the inability, worst of all, to not enjoy life, not to feel good about yourself, to be hung up, to be uptight, to be embarrassed, to be uncomfortable, to be inhibited. That's not Jewish at all. That's Egypt. That's Sarayim. Coming to Israel is Yetzias Mitzrayim, coming out of those inhibitions. Because the very word Israel, as the Bardichever pointed out, are the words Rosh Li. You will be to me a head, wisdom and clarity. From the level of Jacob, Yaakov, the Yud, which comes down to the heel, to the ability to raise it to the highest level of the mind itself. And what happens is when the Jew, therefore, appreciates this, God, this is a very important point here. A lot of people fall on this. God, in God's being infinite, there is no such thing to God as big or small. That is a human concept. In human terms, we think of, well, what's most of the world doing? Or what's most of creation about? What's big? What's small? By God, if you're infinite, the concept of big and small is meaningless. By God, the criteria becomes important versus insignificant, no matter what the size. If something is important, it takes priority over that which is insignificant. That which is most important is the human being. And even something on the superficial, earthly, natural level that a human being could actually have within his hand a remote control to move the planets itself, as illogical as that sounds, that's how supernatural the human being is. Because all of it was created for the human being. That's the symbolism of the new moon, which we call Ner, the candle, the light. It's most phenomenal. If you take a look at these three commandments, look at their words in Hebrew, and watch the first letters of each one. You have Shabbat, Shin. You have Milah, Mem, circumcision. And Ner, which means candle, which is the term that we use for the new moon, is Nun, Shemen, oil. The whole problem that stemmed between the Greek mentality and the Jewish mentality was this idea of oil. The inability to see the supernatural potential that was dormant within the idea of a liquid called oil. Not able to realize that one can go into the finite world, which is symbolized by earth or by liquid, into the infinite world, which is symbolized by fire. We mentioned this the other day, but it's worth going over again to sort of tie it all together. That the Shalach HaKodesh writes that if you look again at the letters and words, you'll see that there's a very interesting difference between the word Sion, Zion, and the word Yavon, which is Greece. And the Shalach points out that there are no coincidences between the holidays and the chapters in the Bible which we happen to read. And the time that we always read, the part of the Bible which we always read during the holiday of Hanukkah are the stories of Yosef. And Joseph, is called Tzaddik, the righteous one. And the reason he's called righteous is because he has the ability to control himself. He is under his own control. If you look carefully at the word Yavon, which is Greece, symbolizes the epitome of the human mind, the ideological heights, the concept in its altruistic, most pure form, the Yud, that which doesn't come down to the baseline, that which is in the higher worlds, the beginning of a new ism, of a new movement. The Yud comes into the Vav, that's the human being, the Vav. The Yud is the idea, the head, which is the dot, the central command raised from the earth. And the Vav is the body that brings the Yud down into the world, into the six, which is the Vav, 6 directions of the world. The center moves out into that world. But as the idea becomes manifest in the world, the Vav falls lower and lower and lower. As one begins to take a look at the idea, many years later, what appeared to be Rachel at night, when the morning comes, was only Leah. It really wasn't everything you invested your life into. It was nighttime. You didn't have a clear image as to what it was. You had an illusion what you assumed it to be. But when the light comes and you really see clearly the truth of the matter, it's a big disappointment. That's the Nun Sofit. It goes down into the lower level. The difference between the tzaddik and Yavon, the difference between Sion and Yavon is the tzaddik. When a person prefaces their relationship to the world to be able to take all of their energy and to focus it into control, this is symbolized by Yosef. This is also symbolized by Aaron. Aaron, the high priest, represents an ability to refine, to upgrade, to move in every movement with wisdom. When Yosef, the tzaddik, precedes Yavon, then it becomes Tzion. And the way that they do that is by taking Zion to Israel. If Zion doesn't become Israel, then Israel, Tzion, becomes Yavon. It becomes Greece. It's like we joked the other day. It's a new definition for the idea of the Western Wall. That really what the Western Wall, you should think of it, is a wall against the West. The Western world, its culture, its mentality, it comes in here and sweeps us out of this country. What can we do to defend ourselves against the Western world? It's the Western Wall. When a person looks to the future, when a person looks to the temple, to the idea of what that national unity represents, then the Western Wall is the very thing that protects us from being washed away. When the tzaddik in us, the essence that's in there, that's dormant, that through action can bring concept into reality, comes into life, then the Tzion moves to Israel. And one last analysis is in the word Israel itself. Israel also begins with the letter Yud. It's also the high ideal. But the letter Yud is followed up by the letter Shin. And the letter Shin represents Shekhinah, the divine presence. It represents balance. It's the idea of opposites and yet harmony because there's a balance in the middle. The letter Shin, like the menorah, which is the balance in the middle. When a person uses their wisdom to be balanced, not for all of the other exploitations, but to be a balanced human being, this concept is attached to the Rosh, to the Resh, the next letter. The idea is brought to your mind. This is why we point out that in the tefillin, which represents that idea of wisdom being opened into the mind, the letter which is on the outside of the tefillin is the shin. And the word for brain in Hebrew is called a moach. When a person puts the shin, when a person puts that awareness of the balance on top of their mind, actually the shin even represents the third eye. You have the two human eyes, but the third eye is the eye of wisdom. Or we always point this out that in Judaism, the third eye is not here in the forehead. It's really, the third eye is found between the hairline, and you know that little soft spot you're never supposed to touch on a baby until it's 50 years old? Right between those two, that's where the third eye is. So the tefillin kind of is like your telescopic lens. I sort of call it like a filter. It gets the cholesterol out of your soul so you can spiritually breathe and be more balanced. But that idea of the shin on top of the moach is someach, simcha, joy. That the understanding of joy is when a person really realizes what's happening. Therefore, we put the shin to our rosh. When we put the shin to the rosh, we are able to connect the higher worlds and the lower worlds. The higher yud to the lower yud. The yud k vav k. The higher world, which is the yud, that's 10, and the vav is 6, that's the body, taking the idea and connecting it to the lower world, which is the kingdom, is the lower yud. The 2 yuds in the vav is 26. That's the name of God is yud k vav k. That name of God is symbolized in the letter aleph, because the letter aleph is the yud and a yud, the higher world and the lower world, connected through action, through the performance of mitzvahs. Therefore, when we understand what's going on, we've connected wisdom to our mind, we see the unity of everything. We have bifocal vision. We understand how to live in the physical world. We appreciate the need to go into the army, to participate in the nation, to build the land of Israel, and yet we never lose sight of the value of the spirituality. That the key is to open the door and allow the blessing of God's light to come into the world. You put soul and body together, one within the other. When a person is able to do that, that is the lamed. The lamed is the ability to learn and to teach. to understand and to communicate, to express yourself, to allow the you, which is uniquely you, to be in the world. Never to make your life an imitation or a copy or monkey see, monkey do of anybody else around you, but rather to be able to learn from all human beings in order to be able to translate that wisdom down into this world. A person like that is the idea of Aaron. When a person is willing to make sacrifice, when a person is willing to put out, when a person is willing to apply themselves, to take the potential which is symbolized in the olive, make the effort to shake it up, to really see what's in there and to bring out that oil, that kind of oil can bring to the light of Chanukka. It gives the ches, it gives the infinite a resting place within this world. Within the darkness of the winter, when everything seems to be cold and miserable and lifeless, a person can find the little jar of oil which was buried under the ground with a symbol or the seal of the high priest. Just like Aaron was the high priest, he's able to find that which is beneath the surface, his history, his heritage, her sense of being Jewish, all of those values, it's right there beneath the surface, and it's galat kosher. It's got the symbol of the high priest on it. A person can go beneath that surface and find what is uniquely Jewish about your soul, and from there can become the light that illuminates the brain, raises us from Jacob with a relationship to Elohim to actually being Israel, the level of Rosh, dealing with God as the God of love of Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, if there are any questions, I'm sure Jeff will be happy to answer them. Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, goodbye, folks.